Satnam. Hello, yogis and yoginis. Welcome to the next sutras in our Yoga Sutras reading and commentaries. We are going to cover today 1.17 and 1.18, which namely it's going to tell us about the different kinds of samadhi. Before this video, the last one I did, which was last Tuesday, those of you who watch on real time, was about samadhi itself, and we went in a lot of detail, especially on sound, on the sound of the word samadhi and what could it mean just by listening to the wisdom in that word itself. And today we will explore this concept of samadhi, this state of samadhi, how it has different stages or different forms, we could say. So let's go into that straight away. We are gonna look at it from the commentaries from the Unadorned Set of Yoga. Let's start with all the names of the books that I use here are in the comments of the video and the details of the video. So if anybody wants to go directly to the source, I recommend buying those books if you want to go deeper by yourself. So this is 1.17. Let's remember where we were. The 1.15 and 16, we were talking about vairagya, and we were talking about abhyasa, the practice of concentration and non-attachment. And as we do our practice of concentration and non-attachment, and we find this tranquility of thoughts and the calmness of the thought waves of the vrittis, and so we can enter into this state of samadhi. Samadhi is the final goal. So here's when Patanjali starts to describe these 4 different stages of samadhi. Vitarka, vichara, ananda, asmita, rupa, nugamat, sampragnata. So sampragnata samadhi is the name of this kind of samadhi which has these 4 stages. So let's look at it from the way it is written here. Vitarka, V, it's particular or distinct. In Tarka is to reflect. Let's see if I can make sure it's in focus. So Vitarka is about the samadhi with a gross thought or reasoning with a sense of perception. We will go deeper into understanding each one of these. Let me just read them first and then we will explore them deeply. Vichara, chara meaning to move. We will go into this as well. And this is into subtle thought. So this is samadhi with subtle thought. We'll see what that means. Ananda is happiness and joy or bliss. So ecstasy. Yeah. So samadhi with ecstasy and rapture. Asmita is the I amness. So this is the samadhi with the I amness, sense of being. And rupa, nugamat, sampragnata. So this is these four kinds are within sampragnata. Now I've seen some translations where they say that Patanjali doesn't say samadhi is made of 4 parts and this is the 4. And remember, there's no verbs, so you have to interpret this. And I've seen some people who argue that these 4 are actually at the same time kind of. It's not like 4 different stages. But most commentaries will look at it like 4 different steps, and I think it's the commonly accepted version of understanding these lines. Let's read at the translations. Ganeshwara says the deep absorption of attention on an object is of 4 kinds: gross object, vitarka; subtle, vichara; bliss, ananda, and with bliss, accompanied with bliss, and with the amness, the asmita. That's all this is sampragnata. Excuse me, I'm not at 100% today, so you may hear some of these sound effects. Satchidananda says sampragnata samadhi, distinguished contemplation, is accompanied by reasoning, reflecting, rejoicing, and pure I amness. So here Satchidananda kind of says it like it's all within Sampragnata Samadhi. And indeed, Sampragnata Samadhi is the name that gives for these 4 things, 4 concepts. Though when you read his commentaries in his book, he does mention that it's like 4 different stages, from the most gross towards the most subtle. So he will point out, and so he will say that Savitarka. Hold on a second. Maybe he mentions it late before. Yeah, he's giving an example of how some scientists were trying to discover how to use atomic energy, and so he says that it's a way of practicing Savitarka Samadhi. What he's saying is that Samadhi is total union with something, and when you are doing research, for example, like these scientists, they are totally focusing on one goal, on one concept. And in this concept, like they wanted to create, to do something with the atomic energy. So that was the focus, and that was a very gross focus, a very particular thing that you want to do. And so that would be like practicing a kind of samadhi, Savitarka Samadhi. But the difference between Savitarka and Savichara is that one is gross and the other is subtle, the way they describe it. I find a way to understand it for myself, which is, imagine that you are focusing on a flower, and you concentrate on the flower, and you do all the process that we will see later on when we go into the steps of the Ashtanga practice. We will see that you have to synchronize and interiorize the senses, and then you have to concentrate and meditate to go to Samadhi. But we'll see that in more detail. But in any case, if you are concentrating on something, be it the breath or be it one point on the wall, like doing Tratakam, or a mantra or something like that, let's say we are concentrating on a flower, so our point of focus is the flower, and we look at the flower, and we are bringing all our attention to the flower, and so that flower is a gross object. So the first stage would be that Savitarka would be when you and the flower are becoming one. This samadhi, this idea of samadhi is like the same samadhi. So you are becoming one with the flower, and you are experiencing and seeing the flower and becoming part of the flower in a way. So that would be Savitarka, that would be the first stage on a gross object, on a physical object. Now, when you go to Savichara, the word chara means movement, but it can be movement on a number of things. Actually, the word charan means foot. I am familiar with this word because my spiritual teacher over there is Ardaas Singh, so he has the word charan in his name. And charan traditionally would be just a foot, but to char is to move, because the feet serve you to move. Now that can be moving in the physical realm. It can also be moving when you, in a poem, in Sanskrit, I believe that chara would be utilized also to describe the flow of the poem, like the flow and the rhythm of the movement of the words, how the words are moving. And chara would also be utilized on the flow of thoughts, which is more the subtle level that I was just mentioning. So I find it very interesting that this very word chara would be applicable to the action, to the words, and to the thoughts. Those of you who have been following along the course on numbers, you will recognize that is 7, 5, and 3. That axis of numbers, 7, 5, and 3, thoughts, words, and actions. If you haven't followed numbers, you may recognize also these 3 components when you hear about karma. And karma is very important because we're going to go into samskaras as well. That's fundamental to understanding yogic philosophy and the objective of the liberation. So karma is very important. Now, when we explore the concept of karma, we learn that there is 3 ways of creating karma. and is karma through your words, well, through your thoughts, through your words, and through your actions. So whatever you think creates karma. Whatever you say creates karma. Whatever you act creates karma. Well, as long as you are not aligned with the Dharma, right? Because where there is karma, there is no Dharma. Where there is Dharma, there is no karma. Meaning that if you lead a dharmic life aligned with Dharma, your thoughts don't necessarily create karma. Your words don't create karma. But initially they do. In general, they will. So thoughts, words, and action, the movement in all these three levels would be associated to this chara, this concept of chara. So interesting that in Samprajñata Samadhi we have this vitarka first, remember the gross, and vichara would be like going from the action towards the subtle. So it's about this subtle thought. But it can be also said it like reflecting. You can also say like reflecting, but it can also be like reflecting upon something that is more subtle. So let me go back to the example. If I am looking at a flower, at some point the physical object of the flower stops being there. I stop classifying that in my mind, thinking that is a flower. I don't go into that anymore. And we just perceive the essence of the flower, which might be beauty or grace. So that would be vichara. Yeah, that would be the stage of vichara within Samprajñata Samadhi. Now, there is a beautiful little story, and the student goes to the master and says, well, master, if it's all an illusion, this student was learning about Maya and thinking, well, life is like a dream. Yeah, so if this is all an illusion, does that mean that the flower is also an illusion? They were walking, and it's like, well, the flower is an illusion, but the beauty of the flower is not. Something like that. I don't remember the whole story right now. I've told it other times with more grace, I guess. But it's like, what's the point of focusing on a flower? Well, it's not about the flower itself. It's what the flower communicates. The flower itself may be part of this dream world that we are experiencing, but the beauty and the grace that that touches you when you watch the flower, that is real. That beauty is real. So when you go from vitarka to vichara, is like not focusing on the material object, the gross object of the flower, but transcending that and finding the true essence within the flower, maybe grace, right? So you are connecting to the concept of grace and the energy that made the flower be alive, and how that energy is within you, and the grace that you can have, and the flowering of your consciousness. Maybe you would go into this kind of field, and then you would enter into this deep state of meditation on not the flower, but on grace itself. So that would be the second section, the vichara. Now, during this process, the mind in some way may be active. So even though we have reached a point where the chitta vrittis nirodha, so they are smooth and they became very flat, through the flat surface of the river, we can see things reflected. Yeah, they can reflect things from the outside. If you look at the river, a river is moving, so it's difficult. But if in a lake and the surface is very, very, very calm, you may see the reflection of the clouds in the sky, for example. So as you are into vitarka, you will see that the samadhi with gross thought, reasoning, cogitation, and sense perception. So you will see that even though we are already talking about samadhi, it doesn't mean that the mind may not be there. The mind may be actively reflecting something. So you are like a mirror to whatever you are observing that. I find that very interesting and very revealing. Yeah, sometimes we try to stop the mind, and trying to stop the mind, it's a fight against the mind. And whenever we fight against something, we already lost the battle. But can we rather focus our intention in staying awake and with our consciousness directing the flow of thoughts, the vichara, towards something particular, rather than directing our attention towards stopping the mind, because then we are fighting against ourselves. Well, a tool that we have, yeah, is like fighting against our own tool, which doesn't make sense. So that's why trying to stop the thoughts can be a battle that you're never going to win. But by conquering your will and your attention and the stability of your flow of attention towards one thing, by this one-pointedness, you can conquer the mind, and then the mind serves you. So we see that these first stages, the mind will still be there, and it will be reflecting something. So that's vitarka, that's vichara, and the V means distinguishing, yeah, distinct, yeah. But it can also mean intensity. So there could be two different ways of understanding the word. Now, when we go from the gross to the subtle, then there is a third layer. The third layer is ananda. Vitarka, vichara, ananda. And ananda is bliss. And we hear this word very often when we hear about the essence of ourselves, our true essence, who we are. As we come into realization of our essence within, we recognize and we realize that we are Sat Chit Ananda. So Sat Chit Ananda, the truth, the reality, Sat, Chit, the consciousness, and Ananda, bliss or joy. So as we are bringing our attention, our one focus concentration of the Samadhi from the flower, Vitarka, to the essence of the flower, the beauty or the grace or the energy that flows through it, the life of the flower, things like that, from Vitarka to Vichara, and we go beyond that, we may realize that that's within us as well, and something starts to flow within in this perception of the subtle quality of the flower, and that's a joy, a certain ecstasy of existing. Existing and ecstasis, very interesting. The words have very similar sounds. The existence, yeah, the ecstasy of existence, just being here, not alive, not being alive. It's about being, it's about existing. That sensation of being brings forth a spark of joy that can be like a little light in the amidst the peace, because we have to understand when the chitta vrittis calm down, you find a tremendous peace within. It's very, very peaceful, very calm. And within that peace, there is a spark of joy that can ignite and can become like a big, how do you call that? A big fire, like, summer, in summer night, a bonfire, like a big bonfire, yeah? So it's a spark, or it can become a big fire of bliss, of joy. And you enter into that state, yeah, peace and joy. And then that is the Ananda level. And even if you can cross that level of joy, then there is even one more later on within the Samprajñata Samadhi, which is beyond the joy. Who is experiencing the joy? Well, I am experiencing the joy. And that's when you meet the I amness. That's the asmita. Yeah, remember the four levels? Vitarka, Vichara, Ananda, Asmita. So Ananda would be the joy and Asmita would be the I amness. So as you are looking at the flower, that's the Vitarka, that's the gross object, then you experience the qualities of it, that's the Vichara, and there is a beauty and a grace, and that enters you because you are doing Samadhi, you are becoming one with that, you experience your own beauty and grace, and then you are in ecstasy of that. That's Ananda. And if you cannot get lost in the ecstasies, then you may realize, oh, I am that. I am the one who is having that experience. And that's the I amness. That is the asmita. So hopefully these four levels are clear. I hope they are. It's very important. Excuse me. Now, when I was reading about these four levels, I've been delaying this video for a little while, for a couple of weeks, because I wanted to meditate more upon this. And one of the things that came during the meditation was the 5 koshas. Because the 5 koshas are the 5 sheaths. It's like an onion with different layers. And one of them is called Ananda as well. And I thought, well, could it be that these levels of Samadhi, from the Sampragnata Samadhi, are linked to the koshas as well? And so I was reading a little bit of Sivananda to try to connect. Maybe I can show the website I was looking at. I like to read Sivananda from this website. Let me show you. This is the Divine Life Society. There's so many good talks here. You could spend hours and hours and hours reading. And he says, well, Atman is distinct from the 5 koshas or sheaths, and describes Anandamaya kosha is the gross body, that's the densest. So when we are doing the vitarka would be on this layer, the Anandamaya kosha, the densest. And then as we go into the next ones, which we have them all here, these are the 5 sheaths. Let me just, yeah. So as we go through pranamaya, is less gross than annamaya. That's the vital sheath. That's the prana, yeah, the energy. We go into the mental sheath. That's even less gross. Let's say it's more subtle. And vijnanamaya. And Sampragnata. I think pragnata and vijnana have something in common. So we are talking about going from the gross towards the subtle. So moving from the annamaya towards the vijnanamaya, towards the intellect sheath. Well, vijnana is not really intellect. I don't know. I don't like the translation of vijnana as intellect, but anyway. So let me go back to the main page. So we have these 5 levels. And this is very profound, because when we are thinking, for example, a disease, when somebody has a disease, and it may manifest in the physical body in some way, some, I don't know, urine infection, yeah, or some kidney stones, whatever. And then you can take it as like, well, that's happening on the physical sheath. But what about this disease is happening on the other sheaths? And then you can find that there is a connection between the physical, the annamaya, to the pranamaya, the energy, to the mental, the manamaya or the vijnanamaya. And you may find sometimes that there is one part of the sheaths that has been disaligned. And when it's misaligned, that creates an impact in all the other sheaths. So that's the whole origin of psychosomatic diseases. Yeah, you something happening in your mind, and you end up creating it in your body. Satnam Infinity, hello, welcome to the stream. So in psychosomatic diseases would be this: you start from the mind and then ends up manifesting in the body. But not all diseases are psychosomatic. Not all diseases, let's say, start on a mental level. Some is just pure karma. You just have to manifest that karma, but that is going to have an effect from the body to the energy, to the mind, to the vijnana, so to all these shits. All right, so we have these different layers of ourselves, and it's good to have self-awareness. How are we in every level? If we feel something low in one of the koshas, like maybe the prana maya kosha, how is that affecting the others? Infinity, I just came from the hospital. Maybe I have kidney stones. Oh my God. How can I relate that to the map and prana maya kosha? All right. And Satnam Isabel, hello, welcome. Sorry to laugh, Infinity. It's not nice to laugh when you receive bad news. But it's, this is an example of intuition, right? I'm connecting to the stream and I just give an example, and there we go. You are right there with that situation, no? The more you study yoga, the more these things happen. And so, Pranamaya Kosha, without going into too much detail, because we have a separate topic, but let's explore it a little bit. ChatGPT told you it's a problem related to the 2 first chakras and fear problems. Fear maybe because it's linked to the kidneys, and maybe it's following the Chinese medicine. I would look at it from the perspective of numbers. So kidneys, that's number 8, and that's infinity. And that's also linked to the pranamaya kosha. So it's good that you are exploring pranamaya kosha because the kidneys are the batteries of the body. So they hold the prana, the energy of the body for working in our lives. And stone is energy number 1. So I would explore the relationship between the water, kidneys, and the stones, and the earth. So that's something you may want to explore. There's nothing that I can really say what you have to do with that, but it's something for you to reflect upon. How can I be manifesting? Because it could be like something in my energy levels or in my 2 and 8, let's say, that is getting solid and like the stone and it's not moving, or it's getting blocked and things like that. But that's the way you would take a concept and a situation, and you will find what is the subtle meaning behind that. So actually, what we are just doing right now is a good example of going from the vitarka to the vichara. Yeah, when I go and when I reflect upon numbers, I am getting out of the gross level and going into the subtle level. So that's I meditate into numbers a lot. So anything is happening in my life, and I find what are the numbers about this, and I know the essence of these subtle elements, the numbers. So it's like going into this vichara and finding what's the movement there, the chara. Yeah, what's moving within the numbers, and let it speak to us. So maybe that becomes more clear then that we have these layers: physical, energetic. The energetic is linked to the emotional, because emotions and energy are linked to the 2 and the 8. The mind is the 3 and the 7. The vijnana would be towards the 4 and 6. And then we have the Anandamaya kosha. And the Anandamaya kosha is the kosha of bliss. And it's said that the deeper you go within yourself, as you are going beyond the material and even the mental, you experience that component of bliss within you, that Ananda. But that can also be an obstacle. You can get too attached to Ananda. Remember, we were talking about abhyasa, in practice, and vairagya, not attached. So what they say is that Anandamaya kosha, the experience of ecstasy that may come in meditation, may even be an obstacle. You may get attached to that and not cross through that stage. Can you please explain why kidneys are 8 and the other one? Well, number 2 is bladder and number 8 is kidneys. And kidneys store... Hold on, 1 second. I'm sorry, there is a lot of fires in Portugal. There is... the whole sky is yellow, and there is dust, not dust, ash everywhere in the city. And I'm far away from the fires, but everybody's walking with masks again. And I've been for 3 days with the sky like that, like quite black, the sky. And it got inside, and it's difficult now to even to breathe. So I apologize for the constant blowing of my nose. But yeah. So let me see. Kidneys are number 8. Number 8 is the number of infinity. Number 8 is the number of death. We explored that when we were talking about death. Now, kidneys are the batteries of life. So when the battery of life finishes, you die. So that's how kidneys are connected to 8. I see the image of this advertisement that was many years ago, the Duracell bunny, ding, 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 with 2 batteries in the back. And he was doing like that. And there was, I don't know, it was an ad. I was in Spain for a while, and it was kind of funny. And then the battery is finished, and then the bunny stops clapping. So the 2 batteries are like the kidneys. The kidney energy is the one that is what is called prenatal energy. Yeah, prenatal prana. So the prana that is given before we are born to live this life. So going back to the koshas, there is these 5 of them. And the thing is, we are not the koshas. Our essence, our atma, our soul, is hidden underneath all these different layers. And as you are going deeper into the layers, crossing from the material to the subtle, you get to the final. Let me bring back Sivananda here. Atma is distinct from the 5 koshas or sheaths. Yeah, he is the first line that he says. So Atman is kind of hiding underneath all this. And as we are going from Vitarka to Vichara to Ananda, we are crossing from the 1st to the 5th sheath. And as we cross out of Ananda Maya Kosha, as we cross the Ananda Maya Kosha, in our state of meditation, of Samadhi, from Vitarka to Vichara to Ananda, then we come into Asmita. And Asmita is the essence of I amness. And that's connected also to the Atman. So we are getting into Atman, crossing through that layer. I don't want to carry on. I feel like it's getting too intellectual. So let's remember that this is extremely difficult to explain. To try to explain what happens on these levels is extremely complicated. We try to make analogies like the flower so that the mind can understand. And that's useful so that the mind can surrender its will to you and it can serve you. But at the end of the day, the experience of everyone will be different. Your experience will be your experience and you have to have it. And we can read as many books as you want, but we can do as many videos as you want. But at the end of the day, it's the experience that is going to be what is going to serve you in the path. But when you have your experience coming to visit these texts and understanding, oh, I was on this point of the steps of the ladder. And also, let me say something else as well. I believe most people who practice some form of yoga or meditation have entered into Samadhi. But maybe just for an instant, or maybe just for a second, or maybe for just one day, or for 3 days. So Samadhi is not something that you just enter and that's it, finished. That's it. No, it may be something that you touch for a moment and then you come out. So for a moment you may experience something and then you come out of that. I'm just remembering right now, the first time I saw my mantra teacher, Mas Murray, it was a retreat on mantras, a mantra workshop. And it was the first time I was going to attend anything spiritual by myself in my adult life, not as a child following my father, basically. Satnam Sohail, good to see you. I haven't seen you for a while. I hope the summer was good for you. Satnam, good to see you here. So I was just coming to visit this teacher, and it was the first time I was coming into a spiritual retreat. I had no idea what to do. I didn't even know. I had read so many stories from India. I don't know. Do I have to bow? Do I have to touch his feet? What do I have to do? I don't know. I was very confused. I was quite young as well. And when you make a decision, then you are tested. So I made a decision to go to this retreat. Then to get there was really difficult. I had to take like 2 planes and 3 trains, 2 buses, and it was all within UK. It seemed like I was visiting another continent. It was all within UK, and yet it was so hard. When I'm finally arriving there, the house is right in front, the venue where the retreat is, and I'm walking this little path, and there is a hill, and on top of the hill there was a single tree, just one tree, and it was very majestic. Lots of leaves, beautiful. And there was some wind and the leaves were all moving. And as I was walking towards this place and I look at the tree, I was looking at the leaves, and suddenly I felt that all the leaves were moving like a being, like the tree was one being, one being. And the leaves were part of the body of the tree that were moving. And for a moment there, I was like, I saw the essence of the tree as a living being, but one living being with all the leaves, and every leaf was moving in a different direction with the wind, but they were all kind of following the pattern, but doing this jiggling. But everything was connected. All the leaves and the tree were connected. It was just one being. And for a moment I was looking at it, and I felt a lot of joy of experiencing the one in the tree. And I would say that was a very small, very, very small moment of appreciating the subtle quality of the life within the tree. Vichara would be, yeah? And then it was gone. And then I continued my journey and I went to the retreat. So samadhi can be like that, can come and it can go. You may be in a meditation and in an instant you may have an experience and then the experience goes away. And the challenge is to be able to solidify that state and enter into the state on willingly, when you want, and establish it so that you don't come out of it anymore. That's the big challenge. I would say that to have an experience of samadhi is not that uncommon. I would say it's quite common. It's just that we don't know that's what it is. But moment of absolute peace and calmness, things like that, those are relatively common. Thankfully, yeah, because that gives us the motivation to continue doing the practice. So I was mentioning that last week I was doing a level 1 in India online, and I was teaching them a practice on the mind, and I was telling them to listen to the sounds outside. And as soon as the mind tries to tell me what the sound is, to unlabel it. So to not go into the labeling of the mind, not unlabel it, but not even going there. So if I listen to a motorbike, not to say, oh, that is a motorbike. Because the moment we label it, we go into the gross level and we identify the object. But just hearing the sound as what it is, we can go beyond the gross, yeah, from vitarka into vichara. So it was an exercise to going into vichara. I didn't go into the details to them at that moment. Maybe some of them are watching this video. If so, then they're not labeling what we hear and just allow us to perceive any sound in a neutral way, an equal way. We can perceive the quality of that sound, the vichara, without going into the gross. So we are moving into the subtle. That would be the idea. All right. Well, this was Samprajñata Samadhi. Yeah, the 4 states of this Samadhi. And that was 1.17. Let's read 1.18. This will be easier and faster. Vidamma pratyaya abhyasa purva samskara sesha samskara. Okay. Anyaha. Okay. Complete cessation, content of mind fields, personal practice, the abhyasa we were talking about. Purvaha is conditioned by samskaras, yeah, the residues of the karmas, and anyaha, the other. Okay, so asamprajñata samadhi, we were talking about samprajñata. This is asamprajñata, so the one without samprajñata. The other kind of samadhi is asamprajñata samadhi, and has no object in which attention is absorbed, wherein only latent impressions remain. Attainment of this state is preceded by the constant practice of allowing all of the gross and subtle fluctuations of mind to recede back into the field from which they arose. There is another samadhi which is attained by the constant practice of the cessation of all mental activity, and in which the citta remains only the unmanifested impressions. By the firmly convinced practice of the complete cessation of the mental modifications, the impressions only remain. This is the other samadhi, asamprajñata, or non-distinguished. So in the first one, I mentioned how the waves are calming down because you are into samadhi. They become flat, but the mind is still reflecting the outside. And it may reflect the outside like something gross, or it may reflect something subtle, or it may go back to reflect into my joy within of having this experience, and eventually may reflect yourself, and you may see yourself watching into the sea. So I'm looking at the flower reflected on the lake. I'm perceiving the beauty of the flower reflected on the lake, and I enjoy and find the bliss in perceiving that. And as I'm looking at the reflection, like looking at the clouds in the lake, looking at the flower in the lake, at some point I see myself. the I amness, the asmita. Well, that's there. That's still a reflection. Yeah, so we are still within sampragnata. The moment, even beyond that, then there is asampragnata, when there is not even a reflection of something else. That's when you are with no object of reflection, let's say. And in that state, what remains? Well, chitta remains, consciousness, chit. But in chitta, the only thing that you can find there's no thought waves, there is no memories. There is only, how is that? Only latent impressions remain. Yeah, the samskaras. Now the samskaras, I talked about them in another video, I think. So that's the seeds of karma. If I do an action or a thought or a word, that's going to be written in the ethers. You want, maybe, the Akashic records, if you wish. Well, that action which has been karmic will have to be completed by a reaction. Yeah, any action has a reaction. So the cycle will complete when the seed of that karma will manifest. But in the meantime, it will stay as a seed. So we have all these seeds in the bottom of the chitta, of the consciousness, and at some point they manifest. So in a sampragnata samadhi, there is the consciousness, there is no object being reflected, and the only thing that remains in the bottom is these samskaras. Excuse me. Now, when we talk about this seed, the concept of seed, in Sanskrit, on the other video on the origins of the word samadhi, I was talking about seed and sa and bija. Well, bija samadhi would be a samadhi in which there is still the seeds, and nirbija samadhi would be a samadhi in which there is no seeds. So apart from sampragnata, the four kinds of sampragnata or the four stages, and asampragnata, which are the two that we have seen, then we can also classify them as bija samadhi and nirbija samadhi. And you may have heard these terms before. And nirbija, basically what it means is a samadhi in which there is no seeds anymore. The seeds are, either they have been burnt away, like the seeds were burned, and they will not be fruitful anymore, and or they are completely gone. So somebody who enters into the nirbija samadhi, that's the highest level of samadhi, that's the highest state of samadhi, and they don't create karma anymore. So you can be in that state and your actions being dharmic from that state, if you are in that state and you hold it, and then any action that you may do in that state is dharmic and it doesn't create any karma. And you are just there to, you can continue living, you can continue operating within the world. You are a liberated soul in life, that's even mukti, but still not generating any more karma. So that would be nirvija, yeah, when the seeds are completed. And there is, so there is, because there is there's a few terms that are, apart from sampragnata and asampragnata, which are right here in this 1.17 and 18 from the Yoga Sutras. There is a few other samadhis that are mentioned in the Yoga Sutras. We will come into them, which is that this nirbija I was mentioning. There was another one. Let me check 1 second. It was, how is it called? Mega something. I forgot the name. It will be in chapter 4, in the fourth part of the book. So that's much later. And it's only mentioned once, I think. Dharma Mega Samadhi, which is I believe is a particular kind of nirbija samadhi. It's called the cloud of virtue, when you have embodied all the virtues. And again, there's no seeds, you don't generate any more karma because it's part of nirbija samadhi. But that only comes at the very end of the Yoga Sutras. and it's a very advanced practice. Again, to try to explain these ones is so hard. How do you explain this? So at some point it's pointless. At some point it becomes pointless to try to describe these things, because the mind will never understand something that is beyond the mind. But that's it. And is there something else? Hold on, let me check my notes. Yes, I wrote a note here how other teachers like Paramahansa Yogananda or Swami Vivekananda may use other terms for samadhi, basically savikalpa and nirvikalpa. And I have here savikalpa would be similar to the samprajñata samadhi, because there's still some duality between the meditator and the thing that is being observed. And in nirvikalpa, it's similar to nirvija, because the mind is completely still and the ego dissolves into universal consciousness. So it's like the most transcendental state of samadhi. And savikalpa and nirvikalpa, that would be it. Then there's some other term as well, one that I will mention because I follow Ramana Maharshi. He would talk about sahaja samadhi, which is the sahaja is like natural. So it's a natural state, which I would say is like he was operating, he was doing things in the world, he could walk, he could even talk, he could do things, but he was not separate from the one. At all time, he was always connected to the one, and there was no bijas anymore. So it's a nirvija samadhi, but the difference between sahaja samadhi and some others is that you are not in a state of, you're not sitting meditating. It's a state of meditation that comes with you during the day, that you can do anything you need to do, walk, work, be with your children, and you don't come out of that state. You are not sitting with the eyes closed. You are interacting with the world, and it's totally natural, and there is no seats. So it's a kind of nirvija samadhi, but you are operating within the world. I believe that's an important one to mention as well, sahaja. So savikalpa, nirvikalpa, and sahaja, these would be the ones that don't appear in the Yoga Sutras. And all the others I already mentioned, and some of them will come later on again in the Yoga Sutras to explain in more detail. However, this was the most important. Up until 1.18, these sutras, up until 1.18, it describes the whole process. We can go into more detail, and we will go into more detail, particularly of the practice we have to do, the challenges we will face. But these first 18 sutras of the Yoga Sutras would be the most fundamental to understand. Then we can go into the practice on how to achieve that. But I hope that was clear. I hope it was useful. Samadhi is a topic that I have avoided for many years, because I always found it too intellectual when people talk about samadhi. And there's all these classifications. I've seen diagrams with like 10, 12, 15 different kinds of names of samadhi, and it just gets so complex, and it seems like a lot of food for thought, food for the mind. So I'm reluctant to go into too much into that. But I enjoyed preparing this video with these ideas, and meditating a lot and reflecting upon these different states. And I am, my motivation is towards sahaja, towards the natural state. So I am pointing towards that. My main aim is during the day. My practice is less the sitting down with eyes closed, though I do that too, but it's more about during the day, as I'm operating in the world, as I'm driving my car, as I'm with my daughters, to go back into that natural state of who I am in truth. So that's my personal motivation and inspiration. Let me know if you found it useful. Let me know if you have any other understanding of these steps, or if there is any state of samadhi that I forgot. I'm sure there is other names as well that I didn't mention. If you want to clarify something, you feel free to do that. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, don't forget to like and share it with others. Thank you for everyone subscribing, and thank you for all the members to the channel. For today, it's enough. See you next week. Sadham.